Hey everyone, welcome back to Emerverse. I'm Emer, a cloud architect with over 10 years of hands-on experience working with both AWS and Azure. If you're new to cloud computing or you've been hearing about serverless and wondering what it actually means, you're in the right place. This video is designed to make the concept simple, approachable, and easy to understand. Here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll explain what a server actually is. Then, I'll explore why serverless exists and when it's the right fit. We'll also take a beginner-friendly look at Azure Functions and AWS Lambda. I'll show you how to choose between the two based on your needs. We'll go over the downsides of serverless computing. Yes, there are some downsides. I'll walk you through a real-world example to make it all click. Then I'll compare pricing between AWS Lambda and Azure Functions. And finally, I'll wrap it all up with a quick summary. Sounds good? Let's dive right in. Before we dive into serverless, let's first make sure we understand what a server actually is. At its core, server is just a computer, one that stores data and runs applications. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy or powerful. In fact, any computer can act as a server as long as it's connected to the internet and able to respond to requests. Every time you visit a website, your device, whether it's a laptop, phone, or tablet, is reaching out to a server. That server receives your request, processes it, and sends back the information you need, like a web page, video, or image. Now, back in the day, companies had to buy, maintain, and physically manage their own servers. That meant setting them up in data centers, handling repairs, performing regular updates, and constantly guessing how much capacity they might need in the future. It was expensive, complicated, and resource heavy. Then came cloud computing. Instead of buying servers, companies could now rent them from cloud providers like AWS or Azure. That made things a lot easier, but not completely hands-off. You still had to manage updates, ensure security, and scale them up or down based on demand. And that's exactly where serverless comes in. Serverless means you can run your code without having to manage any servers yourself. All the behind-the-scenes work, starting up machines, scaling them based on demand, and shutting them down when they're no longer needed, is handled automatically by the cloud provider. You don't have to worry about infrastructure at all. You just focus on writing the code that solves your specific problem. That's it. This concept works the same across cloud providers like AWS and Azure. They both offer serverless platforms that do the heavy lifting for you. So when should you use serverless? It's a great fit for things like automating everyday tasks like sending emails, handling file uploads, running lightweight web apps or APIs, even powering full applications, or scheduling jobs to run at specific times, like generating a nightly report. These are just a few examples. The truth is, serverless is incredibly flexible and your imagination is really the limit. All right, now that you've got the big picture, let's dive into two biggest serverless platforms themselves. The two most popular serverless platforms today are AWS Lambda and Azure Functions. AWS Lambda is Amazon's serverless platform, and it's been around for quite a while. It is older one of the two, and it was released in November of 2014. The idea is simple. You upload your code, set up a trigger like a web request, a file upload, or a message in a queue, and Lambda runs your code automatically in response. Azure Functions is Microsoft's version of the same concept. It was first released in March of 2016. You write small pieces of code, connect them to events, and Azure handles the rest. No need to worry about infrastructure behind it. Both platforms support multiple programming languages like JavaScript, Python, and C#, and both automatically scale up or down based on how many requests your function receives. So what's the real difference between them? Let's take a closer look at how to choose the right one for your needs. A lot of people ask me, how do I choose between Azure Functions and AWS Lambda? Let me walk you through how I usually help people decide. If you're already using AWS, maybe you're storing files in S3, using DynamoDB for databases, or running services in EC2, then going with AWS Lambda just makes sense. It's already part of your environment and the integration is smooth. It's been around longer and gives you access to powerful options like the Serverless framework, AWS CDK, and the SAM CLI. If fast startup performance is important to you, Lambda offers something called provisioned concurrency. That basically keeps your functions warm and ready to go, which means much faster response times. And if you're coding in Node.js, Python, or Go, Lambda has great support for all of those languages and tends to perform really well with them. On the other hand, if you or your company are already using Microsoft tools like Office 365, Outlook, or Azure Active Directory, then Azure Functions is the better fit. Same goes if your infrastructure is already running in Azure. If you're a .NET or C# developer, Azure Functions is built with you in mind. It's made by Microsoft and .NET is a Microsoft framework, so naturally the experience is smoother. Another big plus with Azure Functions is monitoring and logging. It comes with application insights built in, which means you get real-time metrics, logs, and error tracking with almost no setup. And if you need your functions to run longer than 15 minutes, Azure Functions gives you that flexibility. With the premium or dedicated plans, there's no hard time limit. AWS Lambda, by comparison, has a strict cap at 15 minutes. So to sum it up, if you're deep in the AWS ecosystem, go with Lambda. If you're a .NET developer or already working in Azure, go with Azure Functions. If you need longer runtimes or built-in monitoring, Azure has the edge. And if you care about the fastest startup performance, Lambda is the better choice, especially with provisioned concurrency. All right, let's keep moving. Next, we'll talk about some of the downsides of serverless, because as much as I love it, nothing's perfect. With all the great things about serverless, it's only fair we talk about a few downsides too. Let's start with the first one, cold starts. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. If your function hasn't been used in a while, it might take a few seconds to start up. This is especially noticeable on lower tier plans like Azure Functions free tier. Depending on your app, that short delay might be fine, or it could be a deal breaker. So it's something to think about. The second downside is the runtime limitation. Serverless functions aren't built for long-running tasks. AWS Lambda, for example, has a hard limit of 15 minutes. Azure Functions can run longer if you use the premium or dedicated plan, but even then, if your code really needs to run for an hour or two, you should ask yourself, is serverless really the right fit? In some cases, a container or background service might make more sense. The third downside is debugging. Since so much happens behind the scenes in the cloud, it can be harder to figure out what went wrong. Logging and monitoring tools help, but it's not as simple as debugging code on your local machine. And finally, there's vendor lock-in. This one is important. Once you build your solution using Azure Functions or AWS Lambda, switching to another platform later can be difficult. Each provider has its own way of handling things, like triggers, configuration, and monitoring. So even though these platforms give you a lot of power and convenience, they also make it hard to move on once you're all set up. Still, for many use cases, the trade-offs are absolutely worth it. Serverless can save you time, reduce costs, and let you focus more on building features and less on managing infrastructure. All right, let's keep going. Up next, I'll walk you through a real-world example to bring all of this to life. Imagine you're running an online store. You've got a website that handles your front end, but behind the scenes, everything else is powered by your back end. Every time a customer places an order, you need to send a confirmation email, update your inventory, and notify your shipping provider. That's a pretty typical workflow for an online business. Now, instead of building one big, complicated app to handle all of that, you could break it up into individual serverless functions. One function sends the confirmation email, another updates the inventory in your database, and third one triggers the shipping system. Each function runs only when it's needed. No wasted compute, no idle servers. You save money, your app scales automatically, and you don't have to manage any infrastructure. In a setup like this, you could even start with the free tier on either Azure Functions or AWS Lambda, and because these tasks aren't happening constantly, cold starts probably wouldn't be a big concern. Another cool thing, serverless fits right in with the microservices approach. That means different teams could work on different functions independently, and each function can even be written in a different programming language. Pretty cool, right? I think so. Hopefully this example made serverless a little more real and a little easier to understand. Now let's talk about something everyone cares about: pricing. How much does serverless actually cost? Both Azure Functions and AWS Lambda offer free tiers. You get 1 million free function executions per month, and you only pay when your code runs. That means if you're building a small app, testing things out, or just experimenting, there's a good chance you won't pay anything at all. Once you move beyond the free tier, AWS Lambda charges you based on how long your code runs and how much memory it uses. You can choose how much memory you want for each function, from 128 megabytes all the way up to 10 gigabytes. The more memory you use and the longer your function runs, the more you pay. Simple. Lambda also offers something called provision concurrency, which means your function is always ready to go, helping reduce those cold start delays we talked about earlier. But that convenience comes with an extra cost because AWS keeps some resources running in the background even when your function isn't active. Azure Functions follows a similar pricing model. You're charged based on how many times your function runs, how long it runs, and how much memory it uses. Azure also offers a premium plan, which includes more memory, longer execution times, no cold starts, and the ability to connect to private networks. It's designed for larger or more critical apps that need better performance and reliability. If you need even more control, Azure has a dedicated plan where your functions run on always-on virtual machines. That plan gives you consistent performance and lets you run your own infrastructure, but it costs more, similar to a traditional server setup. So what's the bottom line? Both platforms give you a lot of value for free, especially when you're just getting started. For small to medium workloads, the cost difference is usually pretty minor, but if you need higher performance, more flexibility, or longer runtimes, Azure's premium or dedicated plans might be the better choice. On the other hand, if your workload is short-lived, memory efficient, and cold starts are a concern, AWS Lambda is often more efficient and faster, especially when you use the provision concurrency. So what did we learn in this video? We started with the basics. A server is just a computer that runs your applications, whether it's sitting in a data center or in the cloud. Serverless takes things a step further by letting you run code without worrying about the servers at all. The cloud provider handles all the setup, scaling, and maintenance behind the scenes, and you can just focus on your code. Right now, the two leading serverless platforms are AWS Lambda and Azure Functions. Both are powerful, reliable, and well supported. Choosing between them depends on what tools you're already using, your team's skill set, and what your existing environment looks like. While serverless isn't perfect, it has limitations like cold starts and runtime limits. It's incredibly useful for a wide range of real-world applications. Both platforms offer a free tier, which is great for testing, learning, or running small workloads. As your needs grow, the pricing grows with you, offering more performance and control at a cost. If you're building something new or just looking to automate small background jobs, serverless is definitely worth considering. Let me know in the comments if you're already using Azure Functions or AWS Lambda, or if you're still in the research phase and figuring things out. And if this video helped you understand serverless just a little better, go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and tap the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.